Welcome, and today we're going to explore one of the most valuable yet often overlooked exercises for maintaining strength and capability as we get up there in years, and it's called the row. Whether performed with a barbell, a dumbbell, a cable machine, or other equipment, rowing exercises strengthen the muscles responsible for posture, pulling, lifting, carrying, and many of the everyday activities that help us remain independent. By the end of this presentation, you'll understand not only how to perform various rowing exercises safely and effectively, but which variations are most appropriate for you. And I welcome you to sit through, I believe it will be 3 different presentations in sequence, and this will be the first of the 3, in order to get all the information covered that we need to. This is Dr. Pete. Thank you for joining me today. Well, hi there, friends. This is Dr. Pete, and I want to talk today about a specific kind of exercise, and it is the row. And many of you know this exercise or doing one form of rowing exercise or another, but you know they're not all created equal, especially for the older person like me and like you who are strength training. So today I want to explore the best row exercise variations out there, in my opinion, the ones that build functional strength while keeping what I call the orthopedic cost as low as possible. And we need to understand what that means. And if you want an exercise from this list that you can start adopting, I'll have several choices for you. And I will do my best to explain why each one matters in a particular case or not. So please stay with me. I hope you enjoy this. All right, everyone, all aboard. Let's pile into the boat. Well, of course, we're going to be talking about rowing, not really in a rowboat, but using exercise equipment. And many people are associating strength training with pushing exercises, such as the bench press or overhead press. However, pulling strength is equally important and often becomes increasingly important as we age. Every time you pull open a door, lift a bag of groceries, or move an object toward your body, or maintain good posture while standing and walking, you are relying on the muscles involved in rowing movements, whether you realized it or not. Unfortunately, modern life tends to weaken these muscles, right? Hours that we spend sitting and driving, working on computers, I should say, or looking down at phones often contribute to rounded shoulders and weakened upper back musculature. However, rowing exercises will directly address these issues by strengthening the muscles that pull the shoulders backward and support upright posture. In many ways, rowing exercises serve as an antidote to the postural habits, the bad postural habits of modern life. And this is beginning to give us an inkling and insight as to why every older adult should row. Now, many people don't realize that the row is actually much more than a simple arm exercise. In fact, the arms play only a supporting role. The primary muscles trained during rowing movements are located throughout the back and shoulder girdle. The latissimus dorsi, often called the lats, are the large muscles that help pull the arms backward. The rhomboids and trapezius muscles help retract the shoulder blades, improving posture and upper back strength. The rear deltoids assist in shoulder movement, while the biceps contribute to elbow flexion during the pulling motion. So many rowing variations also challenge the muscles of the trunk and the core, and as a result, rowing exercises often become full-body movements that strengthen both the muscles we see and the muscles responsible for stability and control that are hidden. Your upper back actually has 3 different jobs to perform. It serves 3 critical functions that become increasingly important as we get older. First, it generates pulling force. Whether you are carrying a grocery bag, moving furniture, lifting a suitcase, or pulling a garden hose across the lawn, these activities require the ability to pull objects toward your body. Second, the upper back supports posture. The muscles that are between the shoulder blades help keep the shoulders themselves from drifting forward and help maintain an upright thoracic spine. And third, the upper back contributes to stability. These muscles provide a stable platform from which the arms can operate efficiently and safely. Without adequate stability there, shoulder discomfort and movement dysfunction would become much more likely. So a well-designed rowing program will address all 3 of these functions simultaneously. Before I discuss specific rowing variations in exercising, I think it's important to understand the distinction between compound and isolation exercises. A compound exercise involves multiple joints and multiple muscle groups working together. Examples include squats, deadlifts, push-ups, pull-ups, and rows. Isolation exercises focus primarily on a single joint and a single muscle group. Examples include biceps curls, leg extensions, and triceps pushdowns. And you see in the image here on this slide, the compound exercise example is the squat, and the isolation exercise here is the concentration curl. Now, neither category is inherently superior. The question is not whether an exercise is compound or isolation, but whether it helps us achieve the adaptations we desire. And for older adults seeking capability and functionality, compound movements often provide advantages because they more closely resemble the integrated movements required in daily life. So the question is, why are row exercises examples of compound exercises? Well, they are actually excellent examples of compound exercises because several joints and muscle groups work together during every rep. The shoulder joint moves as the upper arm travels backward. The elbow joint flexes as the hand approaches the torso. And at the same time, the muscles of the shoulder blades coordinate movement and stability. All of that is going on. Depending on the variation, additional muscles of the hips, trunk, and lower back may also contribute. This coordinated effort teaches the body to function as a system rather than as a collection of individual muscles. And this integration is one reason that rowing exercises have such strong carryover to real-world activities. Now, when evaluating rowing exercises, it is helpful to distinguish between bodybuilding goals and capability goals. And a bodybuilder might ask, which exercise builds the biggest lats? And that is a perfectly valid question if the goal is maximizing muscular development for appearance sake. An older adult, however, may be better served by asking a different question, such as, which exercise helps me remain physically capable when I'm 85 years of age? You see, these two goals sometimes overlap, but they are not the same. Capability training emphasizes strength, but also posture, balance, coordination, power, and resilience. It values exercises that improve quality of life and maintain independence. You see the difference with that and bodybuilding? Throughout this presentation, I will evaluate rowing exercises through the lens of capability rather than bodybuilding. Let's talk about exercises, rowing exercises, starting with the bent-over barbell row, which is one of the classic strength training exercises and has been used successfully for generations. In this exercise, the individual bends forward at the hips, making a hip hinge, while maintaining a stable spine or a neutral spine, and pulls a barbell toward the torso. Notice that the body is slightly angled up and not parallel to the ground. Now, because the body must remain fixed while the arms are the only part that move, the bent over row involves far more than just the muscles of the back. This exercise develops pulling strength, trunk stability, postural endurance, and coordination between the upper and lower body, and all of that requires different muscle groups. It is a highly compound movement, therefore, that challenges the entire posterior chain. And for many healthy older individuals, the bent over row can be an excellent exercise. However, as we shall see, its benefits must be weighed against its demands, especially in older age. One reason that the bent over row has remained popular for so many years is the sheer number of muscles involved. The lats, rhomboids, trapezius, rear deltoids, and biceps contribute directly to the pulling motion alone. However, equally important are the many stabilizing muscles. For instance, the erector spinae must maintain spinal position. The glutes and hamstrings help sustain the hip hinge, and the abdominal muscles provide bracing and support. Notice that many of these muscles are not moving the weight directly. Instead, they are stabilizing the body so that the force can be transferred efficiently. This whole body involvement contributes to the exercise's functional value. Now, an important consideration when performing the bent over barbell row is which grip are you going to use? You can use an underhanded, supinated grip or an overhanded, pronated grip. And changing the grip alters muscle emphasis and joint mechanics. With the overhand, pronated grip, the elbows tend to move slightly farther away from the body, flaring out a bit. This generally increases the emphasis on the rhomboid muscles, trapezius, rear deltoids, and upper back musculature. And many people find that this variation is particularly useful for improving posture and combating rounded shoulders. On the other hand, with the underhand or supinated grip, the elbows remain closer to the body, to the torso, and this tends to increase involvement of the lats and biceps, often allowing a slightly greater range of motion as well. However, it also places greater stress on the biceps tendon and may not be appropriate for everyone, particularly older adults with a history of elbow or biceps issues. And notice in the photos there that the knees need to have a soft bend to them. For many older trainees, the overhanded grip serves as an excellent foundation, while the underhand grip may be used periodically as a variation. Okay, I'd like to discuss lower back pain in light of this exercise just for a moment. And I would reiterate that the bent over row can be a fine exercise for many older adults, but unlike a seated cable row or one of the other variations that I will discuss, the exercise bent over row requires the lifter to maintain a sustained hip-hinged position while supporting the weight of the torso plus the weight of the bar. And this places an isometric demand on the spinal erectors and other muscles that stabilize the lumbar spine. Think lower back here. But the good news is that the lower back discomfort can be minimized or avoided through proper technique. And the key is maintaining a neutral spine throughout the movement rather than allowing the lower back to round. The chest should stay lifted, the shoulders pulled back, and the core braced as though preparing for a gentle punch to the abdomen. It is also a good idea to focus your gaze forward. Don't be looking down. This will help keep your chest up and keep the back from rounding. The movement itself should occur primarily at the shoulders and elbows, not through repeated flexion and extension of the spine. And individual anatomy also plays a role here. Some older adults have a history of disc degeneration, spinal stenosis, arthritis, previous surgeries, or chronic back pain. And even with excellent technique, a prolonged bent-over position for these kinds of individuals simply may not be comfortable for them. This does not mean they cannot train the rowing muscles. It simply means they may need a different variation. And for many healthy older adults, a properly executed bent-over row can be both safe and beneficial, while for others, a chest-supported or seated variation may provide nearly all the benefits, but with less orthopedic cost. The best exercise is ultimately the one that strengthens the target muscles while allowing the individual to train confidently, consistently, and without unnecessary discomfort. And a practical rule for us as older adults is simple. If you feel that the exercise is primarily taking place in your upper back and lats, you're performing it correctly. However, if you feel that the exercise primarily is taking place in your lower back, something likely needs to be adjusted. And that something could be technique, the load you're lifting, your body position, or exercise selection. Next, I wish to begin a discussion of alternative exercises to the bent-over row. And as we continue through this presentation, you'll notice a recurring theme. The goal is not to avoid challenge. The goal is to maximize adaptation while minimizing unnecessary orthopedic cost. So, if I had to choose one rowing variation that combines effectiveness, safety, versatility, and accessibility, the seated cable row would be very near the top of the list. Because in the seated cable row, the body is supported in a stable position while resistance is applied through a cable. The exerciser sits upright, keeps the chest elevated, and pulls the handles toward the lower ribs or abdomen. And unlike the bent-over row that we previously discussed, balance and spinal stabilization demands are greatly reduced in this variation, which allows the trainee to focus more directly on the target muscles of the back. And the cable also provides smooth, consistent resistance throughout the movement, making it easy to control and easy to make progress. So, for many older adults, the seated cable row offers an outstanding combination of effectiveness and comfort. And one of the greatest advantages that it offers is that it allows the back muscles to become the limiting factor rather than the lower back, the hips, or the balance system. Think about what often happens during a bent-over barbell row. The exerciser may stop because the lower back becomes fatigued long before his lats and upper back have been sufficiently worked and challenged. On the other hand, the seated cable row largely removes that problem. The spine experiences less loading, posture is much easier to maintain, and the resistance can be adjusted precisely to match the individual's capabilities, just by moving the pin in the weight stack up or down. And for older adults with arthritis, spinal stenosis, previous back injuries, or simple age-related discomfort, this exercise often provides nearly all the muscular benefits of rowing, and I mean using the bent-over row there, while substantially reducing the orthopedic cost. So this is one reason I consider the seated cable row one of the most valuable rowing exercises available for the older adult and for achieving lifelong capability. Now, in addition to the seated cable row, there is a standing cable row. And this adds an entirely different dimension to rowing training, and I'll try to explain briefly. The pulling muscles of the back continue to perform their normal role in this variation, the standing person requiring the body to stabilize from the feet upward. The ankles, knees, hips, trunk, and core all come into play and contribute to maintaining balance and position. And that's quite a difference from the seated cable row. And as a result, the standing cable row becomes a more integrated movement. Rather than isolating the upper body, it challenges the body as a coordinated system. And this increased complexity can do a few things. It can improve balance and posture and whole body coordination, actually. However, it also means that stability may become the limiting factor before the back muscles are fully challenged. And for this reason, the standing cable row is often best viewed as a progression rather than a starting point. And your foot position and legs determine whether it will be a pure standing cable row or a variation called the split stance cable row. And many trainees find that the split stance cable row represents an ideal compromise between seated and standing variations that we've covered. And it happens by placing one foot forward and one foot back, and the exerciser then gains a much wider and more stable base of support that way. And this dramatically improves the balance while preserving the benefits of standing. And we just discussed those benefits. And the split stance also encourages proper bracing of the trunk and better force transfer through the body. Because stability demands are lower than in a feet together standing row, the trainee can focus more attention on producing force while still training balance and coordination. And for many older adults, this variation can become the sweet spot where function, safety, and effectiveness intersect. Well, this is Dr. Pete, thanking you for joining me today. This was part 1 on our rowing exercise video presentation, and we will look forward to seeing you next in part 2.